Welcome back to ASTR, bringing together the Adventist Church's past and present in order to inspire for the future. We're so glad to have you with us again in episode 14. We appreciate so much those of you who are regular viewers and those who have let us know that you're enjoying the program. In this episode, first, Ashley Chisholm relates what happened this week in Adventist history. Then, Galina Stelle, our Research and Evaluation Manager, and I reveal some important research findings. Next, Dr. Michael Juncker, an Assistant Editor of the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists, shares another inspiring story from the encyclopedia. To conclude, Meredith Carter, Editor of the Annual Statistical Report, shares statistics about Adventist publishing. We hope you enjoy this episode.
This week, we will hear about two women who worked in the General Conference headquarters in the early part of the 20th century, Grace D. Mace and Lottie E. Quinn. 103 years ago, on July 9, 1920, Grace D. Mace attended the Home Missionary Convention for North America as a delegate to the convention. As the office secretary of the Home Missionary Department, Grace was well prepared for the gathering, which discussed ways for mission work at home, as well as ways to increase lay evangelism in local churches. Grace Derlin was born in the United States in Sigourney, Iowa on June 7, 1875, to John and Flora Derlin. In 1884, she and her sister Lottie accompanied their parents to England while her father labored in the church's new British mission. They were there approximately 5 years. While living in Battle Creek, Michigan, Grace worked as a secretary to John Harvey Kellogg, then Uriah Smith and George C. Tenney, and then to Sarepta Henry. After Mrs. Henry's death, Grace continued to work for the International Tract and Missionary Society, during which time she met Joseph W. Mace, whom she married in 1900. In 1906, the Maces were called to South Bend, Indiana, where Joseph was manager of the branch office of the Review and Herald Publishing Association. They labored together there until 1917, when Joseph was called to manage the Review and Herald's book department in their main office in Tacoma Park, Washington, D.C. 2 years after their arrival, Grace began working as the office secretary of the General Conference's Home Missionary Department, which existed to promote mission at home. She remained in this role until 1924, when she began working as the recording secretary for the Ministerial Association. In 1931, she returned to the Home Missionary Department as its office secretary, and in 1937, a year after Joseph died, Grace became the assistant secretary, equivalent to today's assistant director of the department, a role she held until her retirement in 1947. During her time as assistant secretary, Grace developed and advocated Dorcas welfare work. Grace died on October 11, 1968, having served the Seventh-day Adventist Church for 50 years. Almost 9 months after Grace's death, but 54 years ago this week, Grace's younger sister Lottie died in their home in Tacoma Park on July 9, 1969. Lottie was born September 2, 1878, also in Iowa. After she graduated from Battle Creek College, Lottie married Roland D. Quinn in 1898. The Quinns briefly took up self-supporting mission work in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then transferred to the state of Montana. In 1904, the Quinns were called to Australia, where they served in Queensland and Tasmania. In 1907, they returned to Montana, and Roland became the conference president. Lottie became the Montana Conference Secretary in 1908. In 1910, the Quinns moved to the Greater New York Conference, where Lottie became secretary of the Sabbath School Department. Lottie held this role until 1912, when she became the Missionary Volunteer Secretary for the Atlantic Union Conference. In 1920, when Roland became a General Conference Field Secretary and the couple moved to Maryland, Lottie began working in the GC Sabbath School Department as a stenographer and secretary, working under the direction of Flora Plummer, the departmental secretary. Roland's health collapsed in 1923, and so the couple moved to California for his health. After he died in 1928, Lottie moved back to Maryland, where she lived with Grace and Joseph. She compiled and published a small booklet titled Quiet Thoughts for Meditation in 1930, and she soon reconnected with the work of the GC's Sabbath School Department. You can see her here with the rest of the Sabbath School Department staff in 1938. Lottie Quinn worked in the headquarters until 1945. The church's work is done by far more people than just the well-known names. In fact, the work of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is accomplished through God's power with people like Grace and Lottie. May we all be totally involved in the fields that God places us in.
Welcome to Adventist Research. Today we'll look at what data tell us about the need for training in conflict resolution and reconciliation.
When we examine the world around us, it seems as if there is more disharmony and more conflict than ever before. The recent COVID-19 pandemic, racial tensions, natural disasters, and wars and unrest in certain parts of the world. People's relationships in family and local congregations sometimes experience the same upheavals. And because of our sinful human nature, conflict can easily cause separation in our families, friendships, and the church. However, throughout the Bible, we are told time and time again about the importance of conflict resolution and reconciliation.
As part of the 2017-18 Global Church Member Survey, which used 60 language versions and collected over 63,000 responses, church members were asked to respond to the statement, "My local church has the ability to communicate across cultures, clans, ethnic groups, and religion."
3 in 5, or 60% of respondents, agreed with this statement to one degree or another. See the dark blue and orange colors in the graph on the screen. While nearly a quarter, 24%, the gray color, said that they were unsure. Unfortunately, 16% of participants, 1 in 6, disagreed that their local church effectively employed cross-cultural communication. That's the yellow and light blue colors.
It comes as no surprise that the enemy of the church tries to employ all forces to create prejudice, hatred, and enmity among believers. However, we know that the gospel is for all people, at all times, in all places. The church must work to communicate effectively across different cultures, ethnic groups, and nations, bringing unity and healing to the lives of people.
Have you watched episode 1 of ASTR? If so, you may remember that research findings showed that different kinds of conflicts in congregations and families are one of the main reasons why people leave the church. As a result of these findings, the Adventist Church recommended that seminars on conflict resolution be conducted in local congregations.
To monitor the progress of this initiative, participants in the Global Church Member Survey were also asked if their local church offered training on conflict resolution and reconciliation. Approximately 50% of respondents agreed to one extent or another that their church offered such training. However, 27% were unsure, and 22% stated that such training was not available in their local church. Again, this should serve as a call to action for pastors and church leaders. The church must seek to teach skills of peaceful conflict resolution and reconciliation. Many members would not learn them otherwise.
You can learn more about the Global Church Member Survey findings by visiting the Adventist Research website, adventistresearch.info.
Sin causes wounds that only Christ can heal. The deeper the wounds, the greater the need for his healing touch. Although a majority of survey respondents agreed that their church successfully communicates across diverse cultures, and half reported that there was training in conflict resolution in their local churches, the need for more such training is still there. let us remember that Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Matthew 5:9.
Have you ever heard about the Fingerfone? This small plastic gramophone played vinyl 45 RPM records and was finger-driven. Today's story from the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists is about how the Fingerfone became a primary evangelistic tool in Papua New Guinea during the 1950s and 1960s. You can access this story and 4,000 other uplifting stories at encyclopedia.adventist.org. In 1954, Pastor Alexander Campbell attended the 47th General Conference session in San Francisco, where he met John Ford, the director of the International Educational Recordings in California. Ford was negotiating with the Radio Corporation of America to obtain permission to adapt a plastic finger-driven 45 RPM gramophone that the company had developed. It weighed just 2 pounds, was ideal for tropical conditions, was inexpensive, and could be easily transported on foot across the rugged terrain of Papua New Guinea. Campbell recognized the potential of this low-cost device to provide recorded evangelistic messages in the many languages of the Papua New Guinea mainland. He shared his enthusiasm with other Adventist missionaries to the country. One of them, Sid Stockton, immediately began experimenting with the metal Cake 10 gramophones in the eastern highlands of Papua New Guinea in 1955. The Fingerphones played 14 sermons outlining basic Bible principles in different local languages. After distributing the Fingerphones and recordings for about a year, Stockton observed that people were spellbound and had 100% comprehension of the gospel message in their own language for the first time in their lives. Over time, Sid Stockton and others translated the scripts into 40 languages. The need for a resource such as this was made clear by Pastor Stockton. The missionary's greatest obstacle is not the mountains, nor the trying distances over rivers and crags, but the constant language barrier that seems to defy the effort of any enthusiastic linguist. Other missionaries, such as Leonard Bernard, a pioneer Adventist aviator in Papua New Guinea, soon saw the almost unlimited possibilities of the Fingerphones. In this photo, Pastor Paul Pieri and a group of Papuans listened to a sermon played on a Fingerphone. However, the program had its challenges. The records were easily scratched and, when roughly handled, had a relatively short life. Keeping up the supply of needles was also a challenge. Subsequently, with the advent of cassette tape technology, Pastor Ray Kumba was able to obtain Pastor Stockton's master reel-to-reel tapes and initiate the production of thousands of cassette tapes which were played on a cheap battery-powered player. Thus, the witness of the original recordings continued for many years after the Fingerphone itself was superseded. The story of the Fingerphones reminds us Adventist missionaries of the innovative approaches they used in spreading the gospel. This story can serve as an inspiration to all who seek to use the available technology of our time to reach the people with the message of God's love. Are you interested in more inspiring stories from Adventist history? I invite you to check out the Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists at encyclopedia.adventist.org. That's encyclopedia.adventist.org.
Welcome to the latest statistical nugget from the ASTR Data Collection and Publication team. In this episode's statistical nugget, we will explore the publishing work in the worldwide Seventh-day Adventist Church. In July of 1849, James White packed copies of The Present Truth into a borrowed carpet bag and trekked 8 miles to the post office in Middletown, Connecticut. He was taking the first steps towards what would now become a global publishing ministry. By 1853, early Adventists voted to establish a publishing house in New York. It was a house in the truest sense. Early publishing leaders lived and worked together in a rented home in Rochester. Adventist pioneer Hiram Edson, who had recently sold his farm, let the proceeds go to purchase a Washington hand press. The machine took 3 days to produce 1 copy of what was then called the Second Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. As the church's publishing ministry continued to grow in the mid-1800s, young Canadian immigrant George King developed the idea of subscription sale of Adventist publications. By the late 1870s, King was selling books and subscriptions to magazines such as Signs of the Times. And by 1903, the Adventists had reached 70 of the world's countries. Later, the church's literature evangelism ministry would expand to include the first student literature evangelists in the early 1900s. And as of 2021, there are 13,480 student literature evangelists worldwide. In the 2022 Annual Statistical Report, there are a reported 57 publishing houses and branches, 2,037 publishing house and branch employees, publication sales of $133,901,500, 474 periodicals printed, 59,560 people baptized as a direct result of outreach by literature evangelists, and 13,041 full-time and 12,189 part-time literature evangelists worldwide. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has made great strides in the area of publishing and literature evangelism since its early inception. For more information on world statistics of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, go to AdventistStatistics.org. That's AdventistStatistics.org. To read the full article on which this statistical nugget is based, visit Adventist.org and search for Publishing Work Was Central to Early Adventist Church.
That's it for another episode of ASTR, the video magazine that brings together the Adventist Church's past and present to inspire for the future. Thank you for watching. We're so glad you were able to join us. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe on YouTube, and please let your friends know about it. If you don't follow us on social media, I invite you to do so you can see even more informative and inspiring content from the Adventist past and present. Go to Facebook and Twitter and search for Adventist Archives. We look forward to having you join us again next time as we share information and inspiration from Adventist history and today. Until then, God bless.